got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm gonna try to cover it as quickly as I can. This is a much bigger topic than I expected it to be. I thought that this was kind of an underappreciated research field, but it turns out I was wrong. This is my advances in the science and treatment of alcohol use disorder presentation. I'm going to jump right into it now. This is my not so great named abstract. What is the rate of alcohol-related death? Alcohol is truly the bottled killer. The World Health Organization estimates that alcohol kills 3 million people throughout the world every year. In other words, alcohol is the cause of 5.3% of all human deaths annually. I had to directly quote this because I thought that it couldn't be said any better. 1/3 of all U.S. adults will suffer from alcohol use disorder at some point in their lives. These are significant figures, people. No pun intended. This is kind of a big deal, and it's really hard to get this point across in this day and age because the mass media, Netflix, all these things really kind of reinforce and like celebrate the idea, of heavy alcohol use, alcohol abuse, making mistakes while you're drunk, all these things. And I really, personally, I've had a lot of people in my life that could have benefited from this kind more research coming out and more awareness being spread about alcohol use disorder. I just wanted to punch that in really quick. Excessive alcohol use cost our country $249 million annually. Now, this is not small amounts of money. Things that we're trying to get across right now. Trying to get through with the Biden administration, the student loan debt forgiveness, things like this. I mean, they're pretty expensive things. But if we didn't have these expenditures, our government would have a lot more money to kind of push bills like that through. And I just wanted to point that out. Now, less than 10% receive treatment. This is all significant. I mean, these are really significant points. It's a big deal. 60 million people die annually in the entire world, and if 5% of that is 5.3% of that is attributed to human deaths annually. I've seen that number going up in a lot of articles that I've read. I've seen 5.9%. I mean, it's no joke. I mean, we need to take this seriously. Now, the introduction here. Psychiatrists screen for alcohol use disorders most commonly with the Alcohol Use Disorder Identification Test audit and the Short Drug Abuse Screening Test, DAST-10. Now, I've got an example of the audit test right here. You can kind of see what it's getting at. How often do you have a drink containing alcohol? Never. Monthly or less, 2 to 4 times per month, 2 to 3 times per week, more than 4 times per week. So you can kind of see where this is going. If you're drinking every day, you're already going to be accruing points on this. If you're drinking multiple drinks a day, that's even more points. Now, based on your total amount of points, it kind of gives clinicians and psychiatrists an idea of where you're at or how much abuse you could be, how likely you are to be suffering from alcohol use disorder, which was previously kind of known as alcoholism, but we've kind of reworded it and rebranded it for a lot of different reasons. But this test tries to ask these questions in a non-biased, kind of unoffending way so that people feel comfortable giving their honest responses. Now, the DSM-5 is a diagnostic tool that psychiatrists or psychologists use to kind of diagnose mental disorders and stuff. And it's just the American Psychiatric Association, or the American, APA. And so they release that manual. It's kind of the official thing. They probably have them all virtually on computer databases now and stuff. So if psychiatrists aren't going to be thumbing through that, going through symptoms. Now they got computers and it's a lot more streamlined now. But pharmacological and psychological treatment are being explored, and I'm going to go over the history of that and kind of future or current ones we've gone through, more homeopathic ones, pharmacological ones. I'm going to try to go through a bunch of those right now. First of all, I want to point out that alcohol affects 20 receptors and channels on your neurons. I mean, that's crazy. If you look at this, like dopamine receptors, 5-HT receptors, glutamine receptors, your GABA receptors, all these receptors are being acted on. You can kind of imagine that's like things like cannabis, things like opioids, those are acting on a few of these. But the fact that, and I'm sure they slightly affect all of them as well, but alcohol is like known to affecting and mutating and causing changes in these over time when it's being abused. I mean, it's insane that 20 of these, nearly, I don't know how many there are total in the brain, but I mean, it seems very significant to me that if you look up any other kinds of drugs and what receptors or channels they work on, it's not going to be this number. And the fact that alcohol just gets the go ahead pass, like go right ahead, like let's be like Rick from Rick and Morty, he's really smart because he's an alcoholic, right? And so it baffles me, that how lightly a lot of people take this now. And so let me start off. So in the 1700s, a Pennsylvania physician named Benjamin Rush was one of the first people to suggest treatments for alcohol use disorder, which at the time was described as a state of drunkenness. They called these people suffering from drunkenness, which is crazy to me that, they didn't even have a word for it. It was just, the idea that alcohol could be addictive or cause these problems, is just out of everyone's minds. Like, if you had a drinking problem back then, it's like, oh, it was the person's personality, or no, it's your fault. Bloobity blue. Outstanding that it took such a long time to even consider that it could be a disease. Now, this physician, he had very crude, tools to deal with diagnosing and this and that, and his ideas were, pretty primitive, to say the least. He suggested engaging in religion. He suggested friends and family basically like call you names and say you're useless and stuff. I can't remember the exact term he used, but it says shamed. Yes, there we go. You should be shamed by the public, by your friends. That was a possible cure for drunkenness. All kinds of interesting suggestions from him, but still very important. At least he pointed it out that it was a potential thing. Now naltrexone, disulfiram, and functional. All right, so naltrexone was originally an opioid antagonist. It's supposed to keep your brain from getting as much dopamine. And they found out on accident later that it actually helped as well, your brain releasing too much dopamine when you were using alcohol. It turned out it wasn't super useful, though, because a lot of people with certain genes just didn't agree with it and it didn't work very well. Disulfiram was something they used in tires. They found out on accident as well that could kind of make people sick when they ingested alcohol, so they kind of used that as like a negative feedback loop. It's like, oh, you drink, you get sick, you drink, you get sick, but it's like you can't force people to take the medication all the time. People just stop taking it, so it wasn't super effective. Functional magnetic resonance imaging. This is kind of more a homeopathic thing. They take an MRI image of your brain and they have you look at pictures and kind of give like feedback, and it helps you recognize what part of your brain's lighting up when you're getting cravings, and helps you kind of learn to control your cravings and healthy thought patterns by actually interacting and seeing what your brain's doing as you're receiving them. Now, my conclusion here, I'm going to try to wrap this up. Future research is in the works. There's a lot of great stuff. I wish I could go on all day about this, but reduced expression or knocking down of the ALDH2 via ALDH2 phenotype is also known as the Asian phenotype, because it's primarily seen in individuals of Asian descent. And what that is if you watch anime, you might recognize, there's a lot of time where the main character will have a drink and his face will turn red and flushy and ooh, and it's hilarious. But I guess it's actually pretty serious, because people will actually very, very intentionally not consume alcohol because they exhibit these symptoms. And now why that is because if you look here, ethanol is turned by alcohol dehydrogenase, which is an enzyme, into acetaldehyde, which is then turned by another enzyme called aldehyde dehydrogenase into acetate, totally applicable to last week's lessons, by the way. And so when ethanol is not able to be oxidized into acetaldehyde fast enough, the ethanol kind of overrides the effects of the acetaldehyde, which is making you feel sick. The ethanol is making you feel good and buzzed and blah, 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 it's all good, keep drinking more. And so those people are much more likely to suffer from AUD at some point in their lives. Now, individuals with the mutation build up the acetaldehyde and they get more sick more quick, and so it serves as protection against developing alcohol use disorders. So researchers have been using vectors, adenoviruses and such, to insert genetic material into cells in our liver, which is kind of synthetically inducing through what's called gene therapy, the ALDH2 two phenotypes effects. And so this mRNA gets turned into, it gets overridden by this stuff called shRNA, which causes you to have the ALD, the non-functioning ALD, which the aldehyde dehydrogenase doesn't work as well, and the acetaldehyde builds up, and it's very promising and it's awesome. And I wish I could talk about this stuff all day, but I don't want the point getting cost for me going over 10 minutes. So just remember, awareness is important. This means a lot to me, and it's meant a lot to my family and friends. And I thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I hope you have a great day.